purposely. They were trying to create a person who could see into other realities without the use of a device. And so the person would become the device, and I was one of those people that they did this. What they did was to create blindness in my physical eyes so that parts of my brain would take over the sight of an energetic nature. So that even though my physical eyes could not see, my mind, my brain could see energy fields and symbols, colors, and hear tones beyond the range of normal human comprehension and senses. And so that's how I went through life. And in fact, the problem existed that when it would be raining or snowing, for example, I couldn't really function outside or drive, for example, because there was this constant energy flow from the storm or the rain, whatever it was, in front of me, and I could only see the swirls of energy, and I couldn't move. And the same, yeah. And
so you could drive, although you were somewhat blind?
Yeah, well, I was quite blind, and the big joke is they called it braille driving. And you know how, you know how in California they have those little bumps on the lanes, and they're reflective, And
yes.
So whenever I would go over the lane, it would hit the bump. I would know that, I had to get back in the lane. But I felt actually, Mel, that I could see better than a sighted person because not only could I see the energy of the vehicles and the people, I knew where they were going to go. I knew what moves they were going to make. See? You see, I never had an accident.
Well, let me ask you, did your optic nerves, were they connected to your brain or were they not?
Well, they were not. And in fact, in December 1999, I had surgery to reconnect my optic nerves to my brain. And that's something I will never do again because I had to be awake during the surgery, and it was very scary. And the thing is, when after the surgery, and I had these big, bandages over my head, my eyes, and all this, and when they took the bandages off, I was very scared because I didn't know what would happen. Would I be totally blind? Would I, see? I had no idea what to expect. And when they finally took the pads off of my eyes and I opened my eyes, it was a surprise because not only could I see physically, but I could see the energy fields in addition. So it was like a layer over a layer, you see? Kind of like when you have an overhead projector and you put the different films on it and you build up different pictures. That's kind of what I saw. I saw the human form plus the energy field, plus I could see inside the human form. Basically I was like a living MRI machine.
So if you were able to see, like we do, is it because they disconnected your optic nerves on purpose then?
Well, that's the thing. I don't know if they did on purpose or was it a side effect of the ELF and microwave bombardments that I was subjected to. My feeling is they kind of knew what would happen, and their justification was, well, he can see anyway, So in that respect, I was able to work for them in a very deep way because one of the projects I had to do was to go into hyperspace, which is beyond the physical, beyond the astral. It's the God mind energy. And look at the color, tone, and archetype that exists there, which is the language of God, they say, and then learn what they mean, how to put them together like a formula, and create and manifest physically from that level. So I was able to go in, look at a form, look at an archetype, and I know how to translate it into human language. And that is why in my book, Healer's Handbook, I have in there a dictionary, which is the most comprehensive archetype dictionary that I know of, that translates from the hyperspace language to human language. And based on that, you can create sentences in hyperspace form that will create and manifest physically for you.
Oh, my God. Once again, I keep thinking, how in the world was I not aware of your work and And you better be sure that the first thing I did was subscribe to your newsletter. And I hope, folks, if you go to his website, expansions.com, subscribe to the newsletter and take a look at all that information. If you really want an eye-opener, this is something you have to do. But I presume that you are still, as you mentioned at the beginning, there's no way that you left the project 100%, right?
Oh, like I mentioned, when it crashed, and it crashed abruptly, I was really, it was kind of like falling out of an airplane without a parachute. And quite frankly, a lot of the people who were still alive at the time from the project had difficulties. Many became alcoholics, some became drug addicts, many went to prison, some committed suicide, some went into mental institutions because they did not know how to function. See? They did not know how to function in society. And I wrote in one of my books that out of all the people over those years that were used in the experimentation, less than 1% survived. And of that 1%, very few were able to function in society, and that's why I was an anomaly to them. Because not only was I able to function, even during the years of the project, I did not lose my memories. They always would put masked memories, false memories. They would wipe out the situation so you couldn't repeat them. But it didn't work on me. No matter what they did, I remembered it. And so, one of the solutions they have for such people is they kill them because it's the problem. But I was such an anomaly, and I was a creation anyway that must have been expensive to them. So they studied me, and they still try to study me. I know that I'm always watched. And I had begun a deprogramming process that lasted, still ongoing. Deprogramming takes a very long time, especially when you're at very deep levels. But I'm proud to say that after now 20 years, 21 now, of deprogramming, I have a good chunk of it gone. And when I get triggered, I know it. I know what the triggers are. And fortunately, I'm with a very wonderful spouse who understands this, and she watches and say, hey, you're getting triggered by such and such. And I go, okay. And we watch each other. And we monitor each other, and we help each other. And that's why I do in my work, which unfortunately, my work has morphed into becoming more like a deprogrammer and helping people to see the programs within them, tell them how to get rid of them. In my book, 13 Cube and True Reality of Sexuality, those books, I specifically talk about programming and deprogramming, which is something everyone out there, 100%, needs to be working on that.
You mentioned, just to take a detour for a moment, you mentioned Roswell and that it could have been a setup, just it didn't happen. My question is, I hear so many theories as to what happened there. Could it also have been, if we needed to create a new threat, as you said, first the Cold War, now we have the War on Terror, maybe in the future we have a celestial object, and then maybe an alien invasion. But at the time, could it be because we wanted to let the Russians believe that we had this esoteric or this extraordinary technology that would scare them, thinking that we had it?
No, because they had their own crash and retrievals,
Okay.
In those days, from the late 40s to the early to mid-50s, the UFOs are dropping out of the skies like rocks all over the world, and it's because it was on purpose. And the Illuminati at that point they were saying, okay, we need to create a new global threat so that people are afraid. If there's UFOs flying in our skies and we can't defend against it, we are vulnerable. People are terrified. People are terrified. They do what they're told to save themselves. It's fear creates the atmosphere for programming to take hold.
Well, it's the Hegelian dialectic, problem, reaction, solution.
Yes, absolutely. Now don't misunderstand. There were alien bodies, yes. There were aliens. There legitimately are aliens, yes. But this particular incident was staged by the government in order to give a calling card, if you will, to the Earth and say, yes, this occurred. Now, here's what happened. after that event happened, and I'm saying like the next day, there was a problem. And too many people were finding out too many things too quickly, and so the government pulled the plug on it and created a cover story, because what they had planned was not what happened. Now, when I use the word government at the time, it's not the government and the official government. It was the secret government that staged all of this. And, of course, there is a connection between the secret government and the public government. These days, the secret government is the public government. There's no more distinction.
So there was a takeover.
Yeah, it's already now pretty much one thing. But in those days, in the late 40s, there was a secret government that created these events and had their liaisons with the public government, who basically told the public government what to do. And that's what happened. And they made these cover stories, and they took the vehicle away to the Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio, but first they stopped off in Dallas. Yes, everybody can read about it, and it's all in so many different books. But it was a big fiasco that the government had created, and then they just covered it up.
But explain, what do you mean when you say it was staged, if there were real alien bodies then?
Well, because those bodies were dead before they hit the ground. I mean, the story in the books, the cover books, are from certain investigators that there was a lightning storm that could have affected it, or that our radar system affected the controls of these UFOs. Now, come on. These ships travel interstellar. They're not going to be affected by a lightning storm or radar system of a primitive nature.
I always say, Steward, that if it's so pathetic for an extraterrestrial, more advanced civilization to traverse billions of miles to come here to crash because of our antique technology.
Exactly correct. And that's why these were all staged. And that wasn't the only one. There was another crash in New Mexico, in Socorro or Aztec, New Mexico. There was one in Mexico, the old Mexico. There was one in Svalbard in Norway. There were several in Siberia in the Soviet Union. They were just dropping out of the skies all of a sudden. Why?
Why?
Well,
yes.
because it's like when one staged event wasn't working, they try another staged event. They did this for several years. And if you look at most of the crash retrievals that have occurred, they were from late 1940s to mid-1950s. Like that period of time was most of them. And that's because that's when they were trying to get this thing done the right way. And then when they realized it wasn't working, they covered it all up. They created other incidences that with no evidence. And to this day, they are now still covering up. But I think that's coming now to an end.
So when you're saying that we had more in Norway and more in New Mexico, are you saying that they were all staged?
Yes, every single one of them.
So all the people, the Stanton Friedmans of the world, and all those people out there, what are they doing then? Are they perpetuating a lie?
Of course they are. Everything in history is a lie. Everything that you've learned in school, even science and a lot of math, is all contrived.
Well, history is written by the winners.
Yes, that's correct. And so most of history has been obliterated or changed.
And this is a social engineering project worldwide, Steward?
It's global in nature, absolutely global. Humankind is an experiment, and I write about that in my Blue Blood book. We are an experiment. We are a mix of two species that should never live together in the same place. We are mammalian and reptilian in the same body. And that's not supposed to happen naturally. This is a creation.
How did this happen, Steward?
Well, I go back again a long time when our planet here was really a water world. And it was the second position from the sun. And there was Mars was more Earth-like, and there was a planet between Mars and Jupiter, which was called Maldek, which was also very Earth-like. And make a long story short, all humanity, all our mammalian ancestors came from a star system called Lyrae, which was attacked by the reptilians from the Draco star system. And the refugees from Lyrae fanned out across the known galaxy and colonized many different worlds, including two worlds in this solar system, Mars and Montauk. And in those